Hello everybody, John here, and today onto the garage we're doing a secrets of the XK8 into the upper wishbones. Well, at long last, I'm finally getting on to doing a refurb on my upper wishbones, but I thought I'd proceed getting on with that with a quick secrets of the XK8 edition, just sharing a little bit of experience around the top wishbones on our cars. Well, our beautiful Jaguar XK8, XKR, X100s have a sophisticated unequal length double wishbone setup. Sounds great, the kind of thing you hear in car magazines, but what does it actually mean? Well, a wishbone, think of a chicken's wishbone, is essentially a Y shape with a bit of a leg off the end, and it means that our suspension attaches our hub, the bit that turns with the wheel on, to the car, in our case a subframe, using two wishbones. And it's pivoted here at the back, and at the front is connected using a ball joint, or knuckle joint as some people would call it, to the hub. And this top wishbone, as you can see, is far from symmetrical. Just going under the car for a moment, we can see our bottom wishbone. So here's our wheel or hub, and again we have this Y shape coming together with a little bit of a leg on the front. It's an assembly in this case, and again, at this end, it's attached to the car, or the body, or in our case, the subframe, in two positions through bushes, and to the hub using another ball joint or knuckle joint. And again, far from symmetrical. And if we look at the distance from here to here on the bottom wishbone, it's a lot longer than that on the top. And because the top wishbone is a lot shorter in this dimension, the pivot points are a lot further outboard than they are on the bottom. Why would anybody do any of that? Why is it all not symmetrical? And why does this top ball joint plainly sit rear of the bottom ball joint way down there, which is around this position? So they don't even line up. There's somebody done a really bad job on this. No, this is all part of the plan and all part of what makes the Jag suspension so good. If we had two equal length wishbones, then the wheels would move up and down and remain vertical if they were set vertical until we got right over to the extremes of travel. However, as they moved up and down, they would move in and out quite significantly. And you can imagine going over the average British road that's full of bumps and lumps. If the wheel constantly moved in and out every time it hit a bump, and by a significant amount, then we would get some really weird steering effects. So we have a longer lower wishbone, which is far less prone to allowing the wheel to move in and out as we go over the bumps. And we have a shorter top wishbone, which means we can actively use some of that geometry change in our favour. And what the shorter wishbone at the top means is that the wheel, as it goes up, will tend to pull in just a little, if it's going to pull in at all. If we're not moving far from the horizontal position on this top wishbone, then the wheel will stay pretty much vertical. However, should you really press on around a bend, then this goes above the vertical far enough for us to start to see it effectively getting shorter and pulling the top edge of the wheel in. And you imagine a car going round the bend rather quickly. We don't want it to roll off its tyres and just use the outside edge of its tyre. Wouldn't it be nice and really elegant as you lean harder and harder going around a bend, the tyre actually tilted over just a touch, such that even though we're trying to roll it off its rim, we're still in perfectly flat contact with the ground. So an unequal wishbone setup, amongst other things, gives us that effect of tilting the tyre to give maximum tread contact with the ground, even when you're pushing on really hard around a bend. Combine that with these chunky anti-roll bars, which we'll cover maybe on a different day, which resist the forces trying to make the car lean. You've got a very, very capable, good handling car. Some cars rely on very stiff springs with very short travels to achieve that excellent handling, i.e. we know where the wheels are in perfect position and in perfect contact with the ground. Let's just not let the car roll. The disadvantage of that is, of course, you don't get a nice ride when you're not doing the Nürburgring. And that's what Jaguar does so well. They invest lots of time, money, effort, design thinking into getting a suspension system that will give magnificent handling whilst allowing a decent amount of movement in the wheels. The top ball joint is behind the bottom ball joint because that is what's called caster. Your caster angle is the way that the top ball joint is behind the rear, and so as we steer the wheels, instead of being on a perfectly vertical plane like this, so my flat wheel just rotates vertically, instead it rotates as we steer around a leaning back pivot, which means that as the front edge of this wheel goes in and steers that way, it doesn't rotate like that, it rotates like that and effectively falls over, which pushes the front outside edge of the tyre forward and pulls the back edge of the tyre backward, again resisting the forces that are trying to push the tyre off its rim by saying, no, I'm going to push the tyre even further out to try and prevent understeer. Caster has another very important effect, and that is because the wheels are leant back on their pivot point where they're steering, it means as the car's going forward, the wheels naturally try to straighten up and go straight ahead. It's literally like a shopping trolley caster, but a good one. And as you push the trolley forward, the wheels trail behind the trolley and therefore go straight. Imagine what would happen if they were the opposite way and they were in front of their own pivot point. You push the trolley forward and they would just flip and flap around. That's what happens if you have no caster angle. You get a little bit of that coming in where the car's trying to steer itself. So we add this caster angle so that the wheels self-center. Camber angle is the fact that the wheels are not, on most cars, perfectly vertical. Camber tends to be negative camber, top edge in, and only by a small amount. And this again increases grip when we're cornering because we're trying to roll the tyre under as the car goes around a bend, and it's effectively straightening it back out. Some of youth culture in cars, particularly around Japanese cars, is all about, they call it stance. And that's where they add massive amounts of camber just to make it look like the car is squatting down with its bottoms of its tyres sticking out and the tops pulled in, as if it's ready to go round a bend at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The reality of that, of course, is the car is only making contact on the inside edge of the tyres, and therefore grip is massively reduced unless you are doing very, very high speeds when you turn the wheel, in which case there is an argument that it may have some positive effect. But most of the time when you see camber, it's very extreme and it's purely cosmetic. Or if you're a Volkswagen fan, Volkswagens, Triumph Heralds, a few other older cars, you will notice particularly on the rears that the camber angle can be really well off. They can either be tucked in at the bottom or tucked in at the top, and that's due to the unsophistication of their suspension systems, meaning that as the car goes up, you jack it up, you put longer springs in, the bottoms of the wheels will disappear under and the tops will come out. The wheel will tilt over, which is an entirely negative situation. There are no positive traits that you would have for a car with that. As they lower the car, as is much in vogue with Volkswagen Beetles and early Transporters, so the wheels tilt in more and more the lower you go until you get these very extreme angles. So sometimes it's a side effect of some other changes that people have made. And a little bit outside the remit of this video, we've even got dialed into here anti-dive geometry, effectively meaning that as you hit the brakes harder and harder, so the car will resist diving on its front suspension more and more. And we've got some very sophisticated anti-vibration and harshness measures, which are very expensive to engineer in, but are on our Jags, which isolate you as a driver from directly experiencing the road surface. Now, as some again tend to be in the more racing mindset, people who like really harshly set up BMWs or Caterham 7s or something like that, they're going to go, oh, well, that's why you don't want a Jag. You're isolated from the road. And yes, we are. You're more isolated from the road in an average Mercedes saloon, I've got to say, than in an XK8. But we are isolated from the road, because this is touching the road via the tyre. So you're getting flex in the tyre, and that's your first level of isolation. But then our wishbones are not directly mechanically attached to the subframe because we have rubber bushings inside these two eyes and the two eyes on the bottom wishbone. So the vibrations and harshness have to go through that rubber, which damps them considerably. But then this is not connected to the car either. Our aluminium subframe, which holds our suspension geometry perfectly, is sitting on a rubber V mount and two subframe mounts, and therefore isolates us further from it. And all this adds sophistication to the ride, reduces harshness, reduces noise levels, but massively increases engineering complexity and the number of components which can fail or wear out. And hence is born the legend of, well, you know, Jags, they're ever so difficult to run. No, you're paying for a sophisticated car. It's got lots of components that need to be looked after. Many of these just aren't present on cheaper cars. You said the secrets of the top wishbone, how's this related? Well, we've got to understand that with all of what I've just talked about going on, if this wishbone was sitting 1 millimeter further back in here, because this is rubber and we've got washers and spacers and all sorts of things going on, then that would change caster angle for a start. If the bushes in here were worn out and therefore the wishbone was pushed back using that slack, we've affected camber angle. We might affect tracking if one of these has gone. So, although on mine, because it's British, this thing looks like it's an old anchor that's been dug up from the bottom of the sea, its shape and its position is hypercritical to a really nice handling, riding and driving car. What we've got here is a Jaguar XK8 top wishbone. Not the wishbone off my car that we've got now, Purdy. This is a wishbone off PJ, my previous XK8. And you say, oh, why have you cut it all up, John? I didn't do it all on myself. This break happened whilst I was driving. The other cuts I made. First thing to look at is it's an I-section forging. Expensive to make. Light for the material that it's made of. This is not a lightweight forging, but it has had material removed where it's not necessary. And it's actually very slender. Now, if we ask ourselves, why has this thing broken then, John? Why did that happen? It was actually the bolt, and it's a very long bolt. It's not this bolt. It's a very long bolt that runs all the way through both of these eyes, had corroded into the subframe so that it couldn't turn in the subframe. Then the ends had corroded into the sleeves, the metal sleeves, inside these bushes. The rubber had gone hard, and essentially, instead of pivoting on these points, the car was pivoting purely based on the little bit of remaining flex in the rubber of the bushes. And that meant that the ride was overly harsh. Now, when I bought PJ, which was 13, 14 years ago, my experience of XK8s was not big. I'd been out in a few, but I didn't really have a feel for them. And I just thought, yeah, it's a little harsher than I would anticipate for a Jag, but it did handle rather well. And given it was running 18-inch wheels, which are not extreme on XK8s, I had quite a lot of sidewall, so I didn't really notice. However, it did start to feel a little bit jarring. And then one day, I went down a particularly rough road and I heard a bang. And then the car carried on driving okay, except I could hear a noise now and again. And ironically, the ride suddenly became slightly more supple. So I pulled over rather quickly, and a quick look inside the wheel arch revealed I'd broken a top wishbone. Now, I think that's quite a rare thing. I doubt too many people have ever broke a top wishbone on one of these. But I'd only had the car for about 3 months, so I'd not really got to grips with it. I'd certainly not looked at the suspension and hadn't realised the degree to which this was in a terrible, terrible state. So anyway, I removed the wishbone and cut it up for my own interest and saved the parts to share with other people some of the interesting features. So let's start with these bushes. This is an old bush, and it's been removed from the eye on the end of this wishbone. And what we see is actually there's an inner sleeve there, but this can't run through because of this big washer. Same on the other side. There's a lot of rubber involved. And if I take this one, which I've completely destroyed, that rubber on the end there is a lot cleverer than most people would anticipate. So yes, you can see a plain steel washer on there, but when that's picked out, behind it is what I would call a PTFE bearing. It's basically a plastic perforated strip that's been bonded onto a steel washer that the other washer rides on top of, and that makes a dry bearing surface, a nice slip joint, and it's to keep everything rotating really smoothly. So these things that look like lumps of rubber with a piece of tube through the middle are actually quite elegant items. I've got a brand new one here, and I'll crack this out of the bag for you. So absolutely mint version of one of these bushes, so you can appreciate them just a little bit more. So we've got the two rubber items, washers in the ends, and this sleeve in the middle. If I pull it apart, you can also see you've got that PTFE bearing material stopping this from squeaking or gripping when it's in contact with that steel bearing there. And then beneath this steel bearing, I could peel this back, I'm not going to dirty it up, but we have again, I don't know if you can see, that PTFE material separating it from the piece below it. So there's a lot of work goes into making this, and the contact between the actual wishbone and the bush is all rubber. It's quite firm, and that gives accuracy that's necessary for the geometry of the car. An alternative to these bushes, which some people like to replace because they do want a hyper accurate handling car, they would use this type of thing. This is not off an XK8, but it's exactly the same. This is a poly bush, and it's essentially a hard polyurethane, occasionally you see nylon versions, bush that has a steel sleeve put through the middle of it to replace all this with something a lot simpler that is going to be very, very accurate. There is no compliance in this whatsoever. But in doing so, you do eliminate some of the noise, vibration and harshness engineering that Jaguar have dialed into the system. So there's other advantages to these. They are easier to fit. Top wishbones are very easy to fit, the bushes, but if you're doing a whole car, all the bushes, some of them are pigs, if I'm honest, and these are a lot easier to fit, so they do have some advantages in that regard. Now I'd like to take you for a look at the other end. We've got our ball joint, and our ball joint is what allows our car's steering to rotate, but also allows all the wishbones to do their job and still hold on to the hub. So this threaded item is screwed to our hub, and it allows the suspension to do its thing and the hub to do a slightly different thing, but it maintains that alignment. If these boots become split or perish, then grit starts to get in and it gets to the ball. Now the ball probably won't wear out. What wears out is the plastic elements that are often within the ball joint that these sit on, and very quickly get cut up, and then you get a loose joint that starts to rattle, you get noise, vibration and harshness, and you lose the accuracy in your geometry. How do you remove these? Well, I have to say, most people, when they come to needing to replace the top wishbone ball joint, replace the entire wishbone. It's rather an expensive way of doing it, but you can see why. This doesn't unscrew or unbolt. It's pushed into the wishbone from the top. This element is a flange, and that is pushed in that way until it's hard up against here. So you can only remove those if you've got a press, and even then it is quite a challenge, and something that if you're carrying on watching my videos I'll be doing shortly, so you can see how that is done. Wishbones have these little knobbles along their legs. And if your car's been messed around with a little bit, you might be wondering what these are for. Actually, they're very simple. The cables that run to your brakes for ABS run nicely down this groove. This enables you to tie a cable tie around them that won't slip. So again, beautifully thought ahead. I think the last thing I'd like to remind everybody of on the secrets of the Wishbone is that the geometries we talked about, the front and back positioning of the Wishbone is hypercritical. It affects your caster. And if you get that wrong, your handling will be different. So these get pushed into the eyes on a Wishbone, and then we reinsert the whole thing. Job done. Not quite. There are washers and shims on both sides of the bushes. And those washers and shims are accurately set by Jaguar initially to position the Wishbone such that you're getting a perfect geometry. Now, I'm not going to tell you the exact numbers and sizes of these spacers because it does vary depending on the spec of your car and even the country that it's been sold in. But there is a vast majority of cars where the situation is you have this washer, which is a shaped one, and this deeper section makes contact with the side of the bush. And then a thick and a thin washer this side. An equivalent one of that shaped washer on this side, and that is the sort of neutral or starting point geometry. It can be adjusted following maybe an accident. Maybe you want to change your handling. Track day cars would certainly have this change. But if you put them washers back in the wrong places, your car will feel different. They are super critical. So when you're removing them, make sure you remember where those washers have come from. Well, that's probably enough of this for now. I'm going to get on and actually start doing the refurb on my Wishbones. So if you're interested in anything connected with the XK8, XKR, X100, or just playing around in your garage, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. It's helping us grow the channel, helping us build the community, encourages me, if I'm absolutely honest. And yeah, give us your comments. If you know more than me, which is more than likely, then yeah, let us know below. I don't claim to be the expert. I'm a long-standing enthusiast and hyper nut of the X100 scene who's done a fair amount of spannering and done lots of business inside car plants, including Jaguars. So yeah, I know a bit, but I don't claim to know it all. So tell us what you know, guys. See you soon. If you're enjoying our channel, then don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell icon so you get notifications of new videos. And please give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, and you can share the videos. And below the video is always the area where you can comment and get involved with the chat.